Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala. Gam besimcha uvetzohala. Toch emunei am sekula. Boi chala la 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 lechadodi. Likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabela. The bottom of 141, the last section together from Psalm 93. The ocean sounds Adonai, the ocean sounds its thunder, the ocean sounds its pounding. Above the thunder of the mighty waters, more majestic than the breakers of the sea, is Adonai, majestic on high. Your decrees are indeed enduring. Holiness befits your house, Adonai, for all times. 142, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh. Chatzi Kaddish, we rise, we face east. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uvyomechon, Uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'gala, Uvizman kariv, V'yimeru, Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach, Le'ol me'almaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shmei Dekudesha, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma, V'yimeru, Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Leolam va. We remain standing but face each other. This is the prayer about creation. And so I ask you one of the questions we asked at my Passover Seder. What signs of spring have you seen so far? Tulips, daffodils, crocus, baseball players. What? The robins are out. And the Cardinals. Back to baseball, that's right. Okay, so for the celebration of creation, the bracha at the end, the bottom of the page, Baruch Ata Adonai HaMa'ariv Aravim. 150. Together, everlasting love, you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. As we are about to say the bracha at the end, Ella, just for the extra practice, because, my voice is getting tired. Come on, forward. I'm going to do this once more to you later tonight. We say on the bottom of page 150, as we're preparing for Shema and Ve'ahavta, Baruch Ata Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam.
Please be seated.
Go.
Adonai Elohecha v'chol levacha u'v'chol nasheha
Uvechol me'otecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha
hayom avavecha
v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shiftecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kidoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Nice. Going to do that next week also, but let me explain why you couldn't hear the microphone, because the microphone in this room is not for us, because we can hear each other in this room. It's for those millions of people who are watching you online and are hitting like right now because of seeing you and having you sing instead of me. So next week, Shema and Ve'ahavta during Friday night also. So thank you. We continue page 159 and then back to 158. Sing the song of men and women joined in understanding and respect, the song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come, the song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more, the song of a world redeemed, the song. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot o sefele, Nora tehilot o sefele, Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, Bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, Ze'eli anu ve'amru, Adonai imloch, Adonai imloch, Leolam va'ed, V'ne'amar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, U'galo meyad chazak mimenu, Baruch ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch Ata Adonai, Hapores Sukat Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Amot Yisrael, Va'al Yerushalayim. 162, V'shamru, V'nei Yisrael, Et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, Ledorotam Berito, Lam, V'shamru, V'nei Yisrael, Et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, Ledorotam Berito Lam. Beni uvein Bnei Yisrael, Oti leolam, Oti leolam. V'shamru Bnei Yisrael, Et HaShabbat, La'asot et HaShabbat, Ledorotam Berito Lam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, asa Adonai, et hashamayim v'et haaretz v'shamru Israel et hashabbat, la'asot et hashabbat, ledorotam berito lam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, ledorotam berit olam. 2 changes to the Amidah tonight. What are they? We change from winter to summer with tonight, so we will sing Morid Hatal instead of Mashiv HaRuach uMashiv HaGashem. It is the moving into the dry season in Israel. And the second change, we may do this part out loud. In the middle of the section that we normally do silently, it is Chol HaMoed. It is the intermediate days. And so on page 174, in the middle of our praying silently, we will add the section. It says Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, and Sukkot, but this prayer, Ya'alev Yavo, is also included on Chol HaMoed. So those are the 2 changes. We rise, we face east, at least for the beginning. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, L'Ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rav L'Hoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofech Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Kivurot, Umido Melach, Melech Memit Umechaye, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, קדושים בכל יום יהללוך הסלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Middle of 174. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, ya'aleh v'yavo v'yizacher zichronenu v'zichron kol amcha beit Yisrael lefanecha l'tova lechen u'lechesed u'lerachamim l'chaim u'leshalom b'yom chag hamatzot hazeh zochrenu Adonai Eloheinu bo l'tova. Amen. Ufoktenu vo livracha. Amen. V'hoshienu vo l'chaim. Amen. Bottom of 180. Standing or seated. Ose shalom bimromav. Uyase shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru imru. Amen. Yase shalom. Yase shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Please be seated. Yes, that setting does go on, but maybe if Kenner Harrison sings that next week, we'll continue on. Otherwise, or we'll do another setting of Oseh Shalom. Mishaberach avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah v'Yivarech v'Yirapeh et hacholim ha'ela. O God, who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, send your blessing and healing, your comfort and hope to the following of our friends: Jamie Raskin, Mona Ellis. Prayer for healing. Baruch atah Adonai rofech olim. We praise you, O God, who helps us heal, who brings us comfort. We could sing Debbie Friedman's Mishaberach, but I want to lift up our prayers of healing and not spoil them. So we will just say it. So anyone want to share anything about your experience of Seder? Any Seders, memorable Seders or special or anything this year? Any special Seders from years past? Well, happy Passover, anyone? Ellen? So I know the arguments about matzah brie, right? How you make it? Is it crumbled up or is it like French toast, right? But there are also arguments about soup. What are the arguments about soup? There's two arguments about soup. One is about the matzah balls. That's well known. What's that argument? Floaters or sinkers, right? Soft or hard, right? But the other argument about soup is it clear broth, and sort of, elegant, or is it filled with vegetables and pieces of meat and peasant-like? Not that I have an opinion there, right? But those were differences in family traditions. Hungarian roots? Polish. Okay, so elegant. Polish nobility. Okay. Um, to be fair, yours are the best, of course. So I wanted to speak tonight about Passover and the scriptural readings for Passover. The scroll is rolled, actually, for tomorrow morning for the special Torah reading for this day of Hol HaMoed, the intermediate Shabbat in Pesach. But there are some very interesting features about the selections of the readings. On the first day of Passover, it is the story in Exodus of us, observing the Passover. On the last day of Passover, which we're observing here on the seventh day, Wednesday, April 12th, we have services here at 10:30 a.m., which will include a Yizkor memorial service as part of the festivals of Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot. The Yizkor service is done not just on Yom Kippur. But those scriptural readings, the Torah and also prophetic readings, make sense for the day. The Torah reading for this Shabbat, which I was thinking about doing tonight instead. So Ella, get ready. I'm calling you up again to help me lead something. I'm going to give you a hint. It's not the Torah blessings. It's the Haftarah blessings I'm going to ask you to help me with. Okay? Page 372 in the book, I think, something like that. The Torah reading is an interesting choice, and it's not fully clear why. This is the same Torah reading as for the Shabbat of the intermediary days, the Chol HaMoed Sukkot reading. And it's the sort of oops, I did it again reading. This is the Moses having seen the people sin and with the golden calf and then smash the tablets. By the way, on the surface, that seems to be an expression of anger on Moses' part. He gets mad at them, so he smashes the tablets. But many people think it's an act of love, because what's the second commandment? Don't make any idols. What are they busy doing? Right? So smashing the tablets is a way of if I give you the tablets and you're in trouble, right? It's an expression of love, but it's like oh wait, they're doing something. It says in here, let's get rid of these, right? So now it says in the middle of this week's portion, God says to Moses, make 2 sets of tablets, and I will and write on them, because God wrote on them the first time. The words that were on the tablets that you smashed, oh Moses, right? Doing, when parents fight over when the kid is misbehaving, it's you. All of a sudden, it's your son, right? Your daughter, though this is the second set of tablets, so maybe it's about second chances. Moses does ask to see God, and God says, "You can't see me." But you can see my back, which is weird. And then Moses utters the phrase that we will sing during the high holidays, Torah services, or a festival. Adonai, Adonai, the 13 attributes. God is gracious and loving, and maybe that's why it's read. But then the 10 Commandments are given again, except they're totally different. This is not the 10 Commandments in Exodus. It's not the very similar, with one word different, 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy. It's a totally different, and it mentions in this version of the 10 Commandments all the holidays. So maybe that's why this is read on Sukkot and Passover on the intermediate Shabbat. It's really not fully clear why this reading is read. But there is there is another reading for Passover. Now, tonight, I'm going to share with you the Haftarah and tell you a little bit about that. That's something we don't do that often. But there's another reading for Passover, besides for the intermediate Shabbat, just Shabbat Hol HaMoed. There's the Torah reading, which I just talked about. There's the Haftarah, which we're going to come to in a minute, which Ella will help me with the blessings for. And then we'll do the Haftarah in English. And then there is one other reading, which we're going to study tomorrow morning. There is no reliable Talmudic reference before the 8th century about doing this with Passover. It's not clear why, but it's a scroll. And you know, the scroll of Esther is read for, and the scroll of Ruth is read for Shavuot. And the scroll of Ecclesiastes is read for Sukkot. And the scroll of Lamentations is read on Tisha B'Av. This one, maybe it was the only one left. But we're just, it's not directly clear. This is a very odd book. We'll talk about it tomorrow. It does not mention God. And I'm going to turn the microphone off. It's about sex. I mean, this is the erotic love poetry of the Song of Songs, right? It is, and so Ashkenazi Jews developed the custom of reading it on the Shabbat near Passover. There are other customs in the Jewish world. Some people read this after their Seder is over, the entire book of Song of Songs. Other people do this on the evening of the 7th and 8th nights of Passover. For Reform Jews, we only generally observe 7 days. The Song of Songs tomorrow. And the question of what is this doing in the Bible? Does this really mean what it seems to mean? In which case, it's not even PG rated. It's a bit more explicit than that. I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm broadcasting to the world. Tomorrow we'll be a little bit more discreet in going into some of these metaphors. But man, it's quite explicit. The Song of Songs is, of course, reinterpreted as being about the love between God and the Jewish people. And Christians interpret it about being the love of Jesus and the church. Well, we'll talk tomorrow. The Haftarah for tonight. This at least makes sense if you understand what it's really about. But it does not. This is the classic example of if you come to believe something later, then you can look back and see something that seems to be talking about this. Orthodox tradition believes, what does Orthodox tradition believe about life after death? We actually talk about this in Judaism very little. I wrote an article I gave a sermon once, then I wrote an article about it. It was published in a magazine called The Kaddish and the Grateful Dead, about how the Kaddish is associated with the ancient Near Eastern legend of the Grateful Dead, and that is where the band got its name. This was published in a magazine. This magazine was published. Somehow this magazine found its way into a prison system. It was there read by and one of the things I said there is in Judaism, everybody makes it into the world to come unless you're in one form or another you make it, whatever the world to come is, unless you're a murderer or a rapist or an idolater. So there was my claim that murderers don't make it into the world to come, read in a prison by a Jewish murderer who somehow found my address, and I got, when I lived in Buffalo, a letter from a murderer in my mailbox. So we moved to Washington. Of course, we had already decided that we were moving to Washington, but if you're interested in this topic, both the Kaddish and the Grateful Dead and Letter from a Murderer are available on my website, www.michaelfeshbach.net. You need to know how to spell my last name, Feshbach.net, under sermons and articles and observations or something. Kaddish and the Grateful Dead and Letter from a Murderer are both there, which is not necessarily my point for tonight, except Orthodox tradition does teach, well, it doesn't talk about it much, but believes in both the immortality of the soul and what else? The physical resurrection of the body. And they point to this week's Haftarah about a valley filled with bones, and the bones are very, which means they've been there a long time. So Ella, come on up. We're actually going to do the blessing for the Haftarah, and I'm going to read the Haftarah for tonight, and then I'm going to share with you. I'm going to leave one verse out when we read it, and I'm going to share with you exactly what I think this is about, which is not what it seems to be about, and you'll see how easy it is, if you believe something, to see that back in the past, even when you're reading it in. So, the idea of the question is, does the idea that we have later, the later ideas we have about life after death, are those based on the Bible, or do they come in to Jewish tradition later? And that is the question to keep in mind. So, the blessing before the Haftarah, I'm going to share this with you in English, if you don't mind. Anybody object if I do this in English? You do yours in Hebrew. Okay? Go ahead.
Israel and Amari ve'emet Baruch atah Adonai Aboher b'Torah u'Moshe ado u'Yisrael amo u'Gibe'et ha'emet ha'asada.
Okay, stay up here with me. Excellent. The hand of the, from Ezekiel chapter 37, the hand of the Eternal was upon me, leading me out by God's Spirit and setting me down in the midst of a valley. It was full of bones. God led me all around them. They were a great many of them, spread on the surface of the valley, and they were very dry. God said to me, "Mortal, can these bones live?" This is my favorite line in the entire Hebrew Bible. What do you want to say if you really just don't know? What would the phrase in English be? You know, that you have no clue what the answer is. What would you say? God knows. Except Ezekiel is talking to God. So what does he have to say? I answered, "O Eternal, you know." You're talking to God. You can't say God knows, right? You know. Then God said to me, "Prophesy." It's a very rare verbal form of prophecy, right? "Prophesy to these bones and say to them, you dry bones, hear the word of the Eternal." You know the song? Them bones, them dry bones, right? You're thinking it already, right? "Thus says the eternal God to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. I will put sinews on you and cover you with flesh and spread skin over you. I will put breath into you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am the Eternal. I prophesied as I had been commanded. And as I prophesied, there was a loud noise, a sound, and the bones came together, bone to matching bone. I looked and saw sinews and flesh and skin spread over them from above, but there was no breath in them. Then God said to me, mortal, prophesy to the breath. O prophesy, and say to the breath, thus says the eternal God, come breathe from the four corners, and breathe into these slain bodies that they may live again. I prophesied as God has commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they came to life. They stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army. I am skipping verse 11. We will come back to verse 11. Therefore prophesy to them and say, thus says the eternal God, I am going to open your graves, my people. I will lift you out of your graves and bring you, I'm going to skip some of that. And when I opened your graves and lifted you out of them, my people, you shall know that I am the Eternal. I will put my breath into you, and you shall live again, and I will place you in your own land, which is a hint. Then says the Eternal One, you shall know that I, the Eternal, have spoken and acted. Blessing afterwards, and then we'll talk about it, and then I'll fill in the verses.
Ba'al Torah, Ba'al Avodah, Ba'al Hangi, Ba'al Yom HaShabbat Azeh, Shana Talanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Likdusha, Nak, Nikavod, Olatif Eret, Al-Kol, Adonai Eloheinu, Nakim Mudim La, Umvarhim Ota, Yikrashim Ha, Lafika, Haidni, Let Olam Ba'ef, Ba'avrach Ata Adonai,
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Thanks. You are free to go back. Nicely done. If you believe later on in life after death and the physical resurrection of the body, here's your proof in the Bible, right? That sounded exactly like that, right? Everybody heard that? This is how easy it is to misunderstand things. In general, the Bible too. Cherry trees don't even grow in Virginia. No, just kidding, about George Washington. Ezekiel lived in the 6th century before the Common Era. What happened in the year 586 before the Common Era? The Babylonians invade Jerusalem and do what? They destroy the first temple, and they cart off the leadership, including Ezekiel, to Babylonia. The people were bummed, and they found a watering hole, and they cried. You know that. How do you know that? By the waters of Babylon. What's the rest of that? We sat down and wept for thee, Zion. When I was growing up, I had no idea what thee, Zion meant. I thought it was some kind of ionic particle. For thee, comma, Zion. We're weeping for Zion. How can we sing the song of God in a foreign land? Or Robert Heinlein's book, We Were Strangers in a Strange Land. That's where that title comes from, right? In fact, Judaism is over. God lives in the... We had a kid in Kulano here the other day who was from that synagogue across the street from the JCC. What's it called? Bethel. What's Bethel mean? Beit El, the house of God, right? The original ancient Near Eastern notion was that the gods lived in these places. We might have thought that, or we might have thought that, right? The opening chapter of Ezekiel is so weird that Ezekiel nearly got thrown out of the Bible. The opening chapter of Ezekiel, maybe he's on drugs, right? He's got this thing, and it has wings, and it has wheels, and it has the face of a cow, the face of a lion, the face of a human, and it makes noise. And by the way, it's surrounded by this thing called chashmal. Chashmal is a hapax legomena. What is a hapax legomena? A hapax legomena is a word that occurs only one time in the entire Hebrew Bible. And the problem with the hapax legomena is that we don't have any native speakers of biblical Hebrew, right? So we don't know what it means. The way we know what a word means, context and where it appears in multiple places. So nobody knows what chashmal means. There's a story in the Talmud. A kid raises his hand in a class. I know what chashmal means. It means that he drops dead before he says what it means. So chashmal, in modern Hebrew, it means electricity. So from cognate languages, it may be some radiance or whatever. There's this weird image, but it goes this way, it goes that way, right? To me, the first chapter of Ezekiel is a metaphor. It's a metaphor that, say, you think God lived in that house, and God can't reach you in Babylon. God, God is everywhere, right? It's a brilliant, right? Some people have said it's about UFOs. It's not about UFOs. Some people have said he was on drugs. Maybe, but that doesn't prove it. It proves that he was really good at metaphors. Ezekiel lives at a time when the Assyrians in the year 732, or a little bit later, Tiglath-Pileser II, destroyed the first kingdom of Israel. And then in 5, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylonia destroys the southern kingdom of Judah. Ezekiel lives at a time when the nation has died. Here's the verse I left out. Then God said to me, "Mortal, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, 'Our bones are dried up. Our hope is lost. We are cut off.' Therefore prophesy to them and say, 'Thus says the eternal God, I am going to open your graves, my people. I will lift you out of your graves and bring you home to the land of Israel.'" That's a phrase I left out also. This is a metaphor. It is a metaphor for national resurrection. The nation will rise up again. The nation will live. If you want to prove that the Bible talks about the resurrection of the individual body, you think you can do it by pointing to this. In my personal opinion, spiritually, that may be satisfying. Historically, that's not right. This was a metaphor for national resurrection. It came to be used as a proof text for the individual resurrection of the body. That is not what it was about in its original context. But for Passover, the idea of the nation rising, the idea of coming out of desperation, the idea of coming out of slavery, the idea of liberation, of salvation, of renewal, that is a perfect reading for Passover. So be careful with the Bible. It's dangerous to do this alone. Include history, context, and consult your neighborhood Reform rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you learned something. I always have fun with that dry bones passage. Tomorrow, we are going to look at some of the PG-13 or R-rated sections of Song of Songs in Torah study at 9:15. We will have services, we believe, at 10:30 here in this room, and the scroll is rolled for the Torah reading for this particular Shabbat Chol Hamoed Pesach. There will be services this coming Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Wednesday morning. I don't know what you guys do. I observe, it's an argument in my house. And here's why it's an argument. The Bible says, Israel observes, and Reform Judaism says Passover is 7 days. Outside the land of Israel, conservative and Orthodox Jews have added an 8th day. I like breaking Passover at the end of 7 days. I'm tired of Passover by then. I want to end it. I want my pizza then. And I have an argument every year with Julie, or internally, in the following way. Part of religious observance is about community. And there is a buzz about Passover, an energy. What you doing for Seder? Where'd you go? What'd you do? What'd you cook? Does your family make floaters or sinkers? Right? There's also a buzz in the Jewish community about ending Passover. Where are you going to do? How are you going to do it? More Reformed Jews now than I grew up with. When I grew up for Passover, there were kids who didn't belong to synagogues who would show up at school with matzah sandwiches. I admit this, it's very hard to say. Can we turn off the stream for this? When I was growing up, I did not keep kosher, but I did observe Passover. So I would show up at school with, my mother denied this, but I remember it distinctly. I would have ham and cheese on matzah during Passover. I didn't keep kosher, but I do now, sort of, but I it's hard for me even to say now, right? But not eating bread for the entire of Passover is a key, core marker of Judaism. I as a Reform rabbi, I don't say should very often, but I would say you shouldn't eat bread during Passover. It's night, right? There are 3 commandments of Passover: to tell the story, to eat matzah on the first night. It's only commanded on the first night, but to not eat chametz the whole time. The question is, do Reform Jews do this anymore? And is there a buzz about breaking it on the seventh night, after 7 days? And it's nice to have this community feeling. The only reason I would observe 8 days is if I couldn't find anybody that was excited about breaking it on the... If you've already had pizza 5 days ago, like, why am I bothering having pizza with you? I mean, maybe the pizza is good, but it's like not the same thing as that breaking Passover moment. So, in any event, there will be a commemoration on Tuesday, April 18th, at Beth El at 7 p.m. for Yom HaShoah, the community observance of Yom HaShoah here. And on April 25th, yeah, here it says the 25th, there's a Yom HaAtzmaut, Yom HaZikaron, Israel Remembrance Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day observance here. And I am giving a talk on April 19th at the JCC on the tribes of Israel, more relevant than ever, just as our own country divides now into ever-dividing, ever separate tribes. So is that happening in Israel as well. And the golf tournament for the congregation, the Mark L. Rosenberg Annual Golf Tournament, is on Wednesday, June 14th at Blue Heron Pines Golf Club. David and Michael, will you please help me with the ark doors? We will continue with page 570 for Sfirat HaOmer, as the traditional placement during the service for the Omer blessing is in fact just before the Aleinu. Please rise. The explanation of this, if you don't know this custom, is on the bottom of page 570. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Our praise to you, Adonai, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. Hayom shnei yamim shehem shnei yamim la'omer. Today is the second day, which is no weeks and 2 days of the Omer. We continue on page 586 with Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet kedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kugoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishbechot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 588, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס עולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת. אין עוד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. There are stars whose radiance is visible on this earth, though they have long since ceased to exist. There are people whose life and whose warmth continue to shine for us, though they are no longer among us. These stars which shine in the dark of the night, they light the way for humankind. As is our congregation's custom, if you should choose to do so, if you should feel comfortable doing so, if you would rise as we mention the name of a loved one so that we may know that you are here in mourning and in memory, and then we will, as is the custom in most Reformed synagogues, rise as a congregation as a whole for Kaddish Yatom, for the mourner's Kaddish itself. There are names that you received by email over the course of yesterday and today for funerals which are taking place on Monday. I remind you that the custom is not to mention a name for Kaddish until the funeral itself is held, which is why we are not mentioning those names tonight. We remember Alexander Azen, Joe Eskowitz, Dr. Albert Berger, Renee Beal, Charles Bloom, Seth Brody, Mina Carson, Henrietta Cohen, Ina Cohen, Marguerite Kramer, Frank Cummings, Dr. Milton Cutler, Natalie Friedland, Carol Gibbs, Robert Gosen, Aaron Hirsch, Minnie Olesker Katz, Wendy Joy Yantis Kimball, Stanley Kleberg, Evelyn Kramer, George Krippitz, Rose Landa, Bernard Lieber, Louis Malamet, Arthur Mayer, Craig Mayer, Daniel Mayer, Nancy Mayer, Frida Narrett, Carol Pallas, Ronald Petlov, Morris Pokachevsky, Molly Rabinowitz, Yetta Ram, Daniel Schmeidler, Sadie Schuldenfrei, Candy Shields, Dr. Harry Subin, Mark Vassar, Flora Wasserman, Tilly Wood. During this period of Shloshim, the 30 days following their deaths, Edith Nelson, Sheila Randall, and Leah Lowenstein. The memories. Is there anyone else here to say Kaddish for someone I did not mention or a name I may have mispronounced? The memories of all of our loved ones are with us. Our griefs and sympathies are mingled as we turn now to Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, page 598. Please rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, b'alma divrach kerutei v'hamlich malchutei, b'chayei chon uvyom echon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala uv'izman kariv imru amen. Yehi shmei rabam v'rach leolam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitrumam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudashah b'reichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'yimru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn in this congregation and comfort all the bereaved among us and wherever they may be, all those who are suffering the pain of loss everywhere, and together let us say, Amen. Let's check to see if it's in here. I would like to end with, I think it is, but it may only be in English. Page 666. The number of the beast. Adirhu, Yivne Veto Bekarov, Bimherav, Biyamenu Bekarov, El B'nai, B'nai Veitcha Bekarov. First verse only. God of might, God of right, thee we give, I can't even say it, give all glory, thine all praise in these days as in ages hoary. When we hear year by year freedom's wondrous story. If only we had had a wonderful service and not gone on to Oneg. Daenu, 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 Daenu. With thank you to my assistants tonight,